Faire, and we need to get the third May Faire. And we need to give a round of applause to everybody walking around in yellow and green vests and everything today, because they've worked really hard at this. So let's give an applause for May Faire Committee. Secondly, my name is Betsy Ripley. I'm a native of Mathews County, and it is definitely an honor to sit up here with everybody this morning. And without any further ado, what we're going to do, here's the way we look at it. Each gentleman and lady will have between 5 and 7 minutes to give a little rundown on how they were involved in the war and how it affected their lives. And then after that, what we'll do is open the floor for any questions. So if you'd like to make notes while people are speaking so you know who you want to ask what of, that might be helpful. We also have some Boy Scouts in the audience that have already told me that they have some questions that they would like to address. And when you ask the question, you may either do so from your seat, or if you'd like to come to the podium, that's going to be mic'd and ready for you too. So without any further ado, I think what we'll do is go around the floor and introduce everyone before we really start. We'll start over here at the left with you.
All right. I'm Bill Walters, and I've been in Mathews since 1958. I'm a native of Baltimore.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Baxter Sheeler. I'm originally from Roanoke, Virginia, born and raised in Roanoke. Been in Mathews for 32 years. Feel like I'm a Mathetotian. And but I served in the Army, and that's about it.
Okay.
I'm Arnold Ripley, native of Mathews for 94 years. Been in the Naval Air Corps, and I enjoyed it while I was there because I felt an obligation to my country after they bombed Pearl Harbor.
Charles Lorette, born in Houma, Louisiana, joined the Air Force 1940, and I stayed in for about 28 years as a reservist, and I moved to Mathews in '85. Been here since. Love it here.
We love having you.
Good morning. My name is Ronnie Leitner. I came to Mathews in 1991. We restored an old house, Waterman's house, up in Halford. I was in the Navy. I was drafted at 18 years of age, and I served in the Navy for 2 years on convoy duty. And for y'all that probably doesn't know about convoy duty, I made a little map, and this is the way it worked. We had these were the merchant ships, these were the destroyers, and of course we would be out in front with the sonar looking for the submarines, and of course they're looking for us. We put the troop ships in the middle and the tankers in the middle to protect those. Of course there were, I think it was 6 lines. Remember now, I'm 93 and I was 18. If I do the math, that's about 74 years ago. So,
Okay.
thank you.
We'll get you to readdress that and show the audience that when you come around to your turn to speak. Thank you. And Miss Gloria.
Yes, I'm Gloria Diggs. I came to Mathews when I was 6 months old. My father was a native of Mathews, and I've been here close to, 97 years. And I joined the Army in 1944 when I got out of nurses training when I graduated, and went on active duty in 45 and traveled the world over. Enjoyed every day of it.
That's wonderful. Let's have a hand for these folks. Okay, without any further ado, what we're going to do is start over here on the left and get you to tell us about your World War II experiences. If you'd like to stand, you can sit, but let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that you need to be about a fist length away from your mic to project for the sound.
Well, can you stand and talk?
Certainly, we can adjust that
All right.
mic any way you need it, I think.
All right. Can you hear me? Good enough.
Well, the problem is this sound system is synced to the video,
Oh,
so we need to have it.
okay. All right.
Is that going to work? Okay, we're getting a thumbs up. You're good to go.
Okay. All right. Well, like I say, I was in the Navy Air Corps. This was the plane I was on. Seaplane, known as the Martin PBM Mariner. It's a patrol plane. I spent my time out in the Pacific, and I brought a map. Now, this young man here spent his time over in Europe in the Army. All right. Europe is right here. It's all land. We all know that.
Let me hold that for you.
Oh, thank you.
I'll be your prop master.
All right. Where I was out in here, out in the Pacific Ocean. Do you notice the difference in the colors? There's a whole lot of blue out here. In Europe, the Army and the Air Force did all the fighting. Over here in the Pacific, it was generally the Navy and the Marine, and of course the Navy Air Force and the Marine Air Force. There's a whole lot of little islands and atolls out there, and that's where we were. Well, I don't know how many of you got this little brochure that Elsa made up. But if you read it, you'll have a pretty good understanding of what happened in my life out there. And like I say here, I felt that I owed the government money for sending me on such a nice vacation. I spent my time out in these atolls just flying around looking for Jap subs or watching over our ships. I will say I was at one battle. At one battle. I wasn't on one battle. We ended up at Iwo Jima.
Ooh.
Yeah, ooh. We flew up there. Actually, the main base we operated out of was Anahuac, which was in the Marshall Islands. But we went from there to Saipan and then up to Iwo. We got up there about a week after the Marines invaded, and our job was to fly between Iwo and Japan to see if the Japanese were sending or going to send reinforcements down to Iwo. As it so happens, they didn't, and so that's what happened. But that was the only place, and well, I saw fighting. Our plane was moored maybe 50 yards off the base of Mount Suribachi. Now we all know about that mountain on the south end of Iwo Jima. Well, the Navy had put out these mooring buoys where our planes would be attached to, well, when we weren't flying. And ours was about 50 yards off the base of Mount Suribachi. That's about as close I ever got to any actual warfare. Other than that, my time in the Navy was great. I enjoyed it.
That's good. Let's have a hand. I'm sure we can talk these veterans into staying behind a little after we finish with the question and answer period, and you all can get their signatures and their notes written on their bios. Autographs, that's what I mean, autographs. You can get their autographs.
I've got other stuff here if anybody wants to look at it. I did bring a picture of the crew on George 1. This was the captain of Squadron 19, and that's the crew. And up here in the back on the left. So, anybody want to see anything? Well, I brought it along.
Good. We'll have it on display, and you're welcome to come up and look at it after we finish our questioning. Thank you very much, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our next guest and speaker will be Mr. Baxter Sheilor.
Thank you. I can't stand because my legs give out on me. I was born in Roanoke, went in the Army in 1943, and took basic in Texas. I all know where Texas is at. I stayed there and took my basic. Was shipped out from there and went overseas. I trained in anti-aircraft. Put me overseas and put me in an artillery piece that I'd never seen, and expect me to go in there and fight. But I did, and the first day I was there, we got shelled. The Germans shelled us, and I was scared to death. And anybody tells you that they weren't scared, they're telling you a lie, because it is horrible. That was in Italy, and I went from Italy all the way up through past Rome, and shipped out and went to southern France, invasion of southern France, went all the way through France into Germany, and went through that Germany into Austria, and the war ended. I was in Austria, and that's my career in the Army. Thank you.
Now we have someone that I'm sure most people recognize is Mr. Arnold Ripley.
I joined the Navy for 17 in 1942. Took boot camp in Jacksonville. They sent me to Daytona Beach. That's where I stayed the whole war. I never shot at nobody. Nobody's ever shot at me. We had, I was on a night flying crew where we trained the pilots in daylight and
Go ahead.
and night flying. When they left us, they were ready for the carrier. I remember one man was a school teacher in Ohio. He had just come back from overseas, and he had dropped a bomb down the stack of a carrier, Japanese carrier. He was an instructor. I seem to remember that a long time. I stayed on the same crew the whole time, whenever my name come up to be shipped out, Chief would take it off. I was doing too much work for him. I saw that all the planes come in, parked them, saw that they was gassed up and all those chains. They had a problem, but we told them in the carrier, in the hangar, for the crew to work on them. So I was there the whole time. Like I say, I didn't shoot at nobody. Nobody shot at me.
I'm going to skip over, and our next guest is Miss Gloria Diggs.
Well, I was at the Medical College of Virginia in nurses training when the war started. And the troops went down Broad Street to the train station going to battle. And I said, I'll be there if the war's not over. Well, the war had not ended in 1944 when I graduated. And I went on active duty in 45. And I had my basic training in Fort Meade, Maryland, and went to California on my way to the invasion of Japan. 3 days, I was on the USS Comfort with 200 nurses going for the invasion of Japan. They dropped the bomb on Japan, and we were diverted to the Philippines. And at that time, the Philippines was devastated. The people were starving. But we were there for about 6 months. And they kind of forgot about us. The war was over and everybody was busy and they forgot about us. We hadn't gotten any mail. And we complained about the lack of mail. Finally, 96 bags of mail was delivered to the Philippines for 200 nurses. And then, of course, we came to the attention of the powers that be, and they sent us back to the U.S. And I was in and out of the military several times, but I eventually went to regular Army and traveled the world over. I was in Okinawa, I was in Japan, I was many places in the U.S., and one of the very interesting things I got to do was go on a mission to Yugoslavia, in Skopje, when they had an earthquake. And we set up a field hospital there and took care of the people who were injured from the earthquake. And it was very interesting. One of the things was we had an elderly lady who we wanted to take her clothes off and give her a bath and treat her. She thought we were the enemy, and she was holding on to her clothes with dear life because we couldn't have her clothes. But anyway, we convinced her and that she was safe and we were not going to bother. And I went in as a first lieutenant, a second lieutenant in the Army Air Corps, and was retired as a full colonel. And that was an accomplishment for women back in those days, because women were supposed to stay at home, take care of their husbands, and have children. And that was not my bailiwick. So I made it by hard work, and I enjoyed every day of my life in the military.
And we're so glad you came back to Lighten Mathews at Onemo. Okay, it's your turn.
Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the best thing that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
The best thing that I liked about the Navy, our home port was New York. And of course, during the war, we couldn't pay for a thing in a pub because someone would always pick up the ticket. Whole lot of different in World War II than it was in Vietnam, as we know. However, I was 18 years old, married, drafted, and I think my training was in Sampson, New York, and it was cold. Oh, my Lord, it was cold. But then I was assigned to a destroyer escort where we escorted troops and ammunition, etc., over to Europe. I think one of the things that really sticks in my mind is we were in the English Channel, and I saw something coming over, flying without a propeller. And it was a V-2 rocket. And we tried to shoot it down. The British tried to shoot it down. The Americans tried to shoot it down. So, and of course, we were trying to shoot it down. So a lot of us was trying to shoot it down. Finally, they told us to cease fire because we were shooting the Americans down. So, but anyway, about the only event that I can think of is we lost a tanker going into Ireland. And we were 200 or 300 yards from it when a torpedo hit it. They could have got us just as good as they could have got the tanker. But that's what they were after, was tankers and troop ships. So I didn't have a lot of excitement, I guess, in the service. To be honest with you, I didn't like the service. I really didn't. And when we got out after World War II was over, then you got out on points. You got out from so many points if you were married, so many points if you were in a war zone, etc. I can't remember all of them now. But at the particular time, I knew to the fraction when I was supposed to get out. So, anyway, and speaking of mail, then they used to fly the mail to meet the ship. My wife wrote me every day, and she numbered the letters. And when we'd be in Europe, sometime I would not receive any mails. And then we'd get back in to the States, and they would say, lighten up, lighten up, lighten up, so forth. But it was, at 18, it was a real experience. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but thank you all for listening. Bye.
And our last World War II veteran that will speak would be Mr. Bill Lorette. And I told him if he went too long, I was going to pinch his leg. That's why I set him close to me.
Hurts.
I see. I got the info on you.
Right.
Very interesting man, though. Very interesting. Stay on your mic now.
Okay, back to what he was saying, the V-2 rocket that came from Germany to England, the British had their Spitfire, and the other plane would go along this thing and tip it over, and they got a lot of them that way. But just turning it upside down, yeah, with the plane.
I didn't know that. I know we were shooting at that thing with no propeller.
Okay, I was in a plantation in Louisiana, and I saw a plane when I was 5 years old, and I said, that's for me, and it was for me. So I joined the Air Corps a year before Pearl Harbor, buck private, $18.75 a month. And life in early, before war, was horror in the barracks. I mean, we had a guy named Cagle from Tennessee, and his buddy would come in the barracks at night and take anything they wanted. So at the other end of the barracks was a professional wrestler from Eugene, Oregon. And I went to him and I said, you know what, I'll buy you a can of tobacco every year if you come to my bed and watch me when Cagle comes in. So sure enough, the next 2 weeks, Cagle comes with his buddy, and my wrestler gave up my bed, and they left and never came back. So I stayed as buck private for a year because you couldn't begin to hope to get a promotion for a year in pre-war Army Air Corps. So all of a sudden, let's see if I can go this right. I decided to talk to the first sergeant. I want to take, I'd never been to college. I want to take the college test. That I may take a 3-hour test and get credit for 2 hours, 2 years of college. He said, fine, he set it up. I took it that morning. They classified at noon. I passed. That afternoon, I said to him, now can I take the cadet exam? That was another 2-hour exam. That afternoon, passed. So all of a sudden, I was ready to go to flight school, my dream. And war broke out. So all of a sudden, 2 or 3 days after the war, a whole line of vehicles was by our barracks. And the commanding officer came out and said, all these vehicles will be driven to Charleston, South Carolina, to be sent to England. So anybody who's got a driver's license, pick up a vehicle and get married, get your clothes ready, and let's go. We're going to stay on the road. We're not spending any night at any base. We're going to spend the night on the road. So I ran the barracks and put everything I could in the barrack bag and got into the ambulance and sat there. And he said to me, why did you pick the ambulance? And I said to him, well, we're going to sleep on the road. This has got beds. It's true.
Now we know how he passed all those tests. He's smart.
So anyway, I went to cadet school and being very mischievous. Oh, when I left home, I went to my Father Foray, Catholic priest whom I had been living in hell to, and I said, Father Foray, I'm going to join the Air Corps. And he says, when? So anyway, I got in the Air Cadets, went through all the flight schools, and when I got out, I said, boy, I'm going to war. I want B-17s. And my instructor says, you're not going anywhere. Your grades are high. You're staying here being an instructor. And I was an instructor for 2 years, 1942, 1943, thousands of hours. I mean, when you're an instructor, you learn to fly because your students will make every mistake in the book. And there have been some close ones, but you learn to fly, really fly. So finally I got out, and they sent me to Burma, which is Myanmar, because there was the worst weather in the world, the worst weather anywhere. And they only picked people with 2,000 or 3,000 hours then to go there. And we went there in a C-46 Commando, which was built like a tank for that weather. And I flew that hump, I think it was 60 or 70 times. And I've seen weather was so bad that I couldn't even read the instrument panel. I had to put both feet on the pen to read the instrument. It was horrible. Other times you'd go up a half a mile and drop a half a mile. Updraft like you've never heard of. The worst weather in the world. And one day I was taking over, I think, 6 or 7 donkeys. Donkeys are great for jungle fighting because they can carry a lot of weight and they can climb anywhere. So anyway, they put him to sleep. And one of them woke up halfway through a storm. I mean, he was raising heck. So I sent the co-pilot back and the radio operator said, go back and do something. So they got back and they wrestled him in this weather and tied him up. In the meantime, he kicked 2 holes inside of my plane, just kicked them out. And we got into China and got rid of him. So I put in so many missions so quickly that when the war was over, the commanding officer said to me, no, it was before the war was over, I completed all my missions. And he said, you have completed them so quickly, I'm giving you another 50 missions. So I had to fly 50 more.
Your dream.
Yes, I loved it.
Your dream.
I'll tell you that. So then when the war was over in August, I went to Kunming, and I told my commanding officer, look, there are 4 or 5 of us that want to go to Shanghai and catch a ship and complete our trip around the world. He said, fine. So went to Shanghai to wait for the ship. I wanted to destroy or a cruiser. Waiting to come in, and then all of a sudden this Army colonel came out of nowhere and says, I'm sorry to tell you, but President Truman has promised the President of China that help, so you guys are in another war. So I got another 50 missions. And the Chinese treated us like kings because we were going to do their work for them. So anyway, the maps they gave us were from the National Geographic, 8.5 by 11, and half of it was unexplored territory. That's the way it was. Nobody had been up there. So we didn't fly up there. We would fly real short of it. I'll give you 2 instances of the flights we put in. We put in about 40 or 50 flights. One flight was near Gobi Desert. I got out of the plane, and while they unloaded the plane of gasoline and whatever the hell they wanted, I walked into a dry riverbed, a wadi, and I saw over here on the right a hole that somebody had dug with a stick. It was a man and a woman. I walked up close, and here was this man and woman, Chinese, holding each other. It was December, and they were freezing, and they looked at me and smiled. They were wearing tree bark that they stripped from a tree. And I looked at it, I think, I'll never see anything like this again. On another trip to northern China, I saw a bunch of children. The girls had their feet, they were hobbling. They had no toes. Because at birth, they bound their feet. Well, they were just as happy as they could be. And I asked this Chinese general, I said, why did you all do this? He said 2 reasons. One is they may run away. The second is this a thing of beauty. I guess. Anyway, we got back to China. We went to the seaport and took the first ship back to the States. We weren't going to get involved in any more wars. So I got back to the States, and as an adjunct to World War II and the Chinese War, we walked in another situation where they said we desperately need officers to manage Japan and Germany. There was horrible hunger. Germany was practically destroyed. So I was in Tacoma, Washington, wanting to get back in the Air Force because I was a reservist, never been to college. I figured they're going to knock me out. So I went to the adjutant, and I said, what have you got that I can volunteer for? He says, the only thing we got is military government, and you're not involved. He was a captain. I was a captain. So I said to him, when are they kicking you out? Next week. What do you care? I don't. And he sent my name in. I was the last name to go into Washington for military government, and they took me without even knowing who I was. I got to Carlisle Barracks, and it was the most intense course I've ever taken in my life. Military government, German history, German law. And we were going to be a German governor and a civil judge. And they trained us for that. It's easy to be a judge, but not easy to be a lawyer. All right, I got in the ship, went to Germany, we trained back to Bavaria, where the U.S. government was situated. And this General Mueller came on the train, he said, what is a pilot doing in military government? Sir, I've been to school, I can do it, blah, 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 blah. So he said to me, I'm going to send you to Major Doyle in Regensburg. He's really qualified. He will train you. And when you're ready, you'll get your own little long Chrysler as governor. And I did that. And many, many things happened there. And I could write 5 books.
But not today.
So, then he said to me when he called me up, I didn't see him very often. He took care of the burgomaster, I took care of the police, fire chief, all the city registers, and I got it going. So one day he called me and said, okay, you got your own county, you're qualified. So I got in the vehicle and went to a place called Neuenburg von Wald, which is the middle of Bavaria, about 2 hours from Czechoslovakia, and next to nothing. And in that area, 40 miles to the left, right, front, and back was not a single American, but moi, who was the governor and the judge. All right. Judgeship. I tried many cases because the Germans were allowed to drive only Germans who broke German law. I tried Germans who broke any law, anybody who broke any other law. So I held my court on Wednesday nights, Friday nights, and for my staff of 28, 2 of them were lawyers, one from Prague and one from Warsaw. And they knew that my limits were 1 year in jail and 10,000 marks. So anything of that, they would refer to a higher court. But I tried many cases Wednesday night and Friday night. I haven't got the time to go through some of them because they were unbelievable. But whenever I tried a case, I always said 2 things. First of all, I will let you know next week because I always want to think, when you put a man in jail, if he might be innocent, and our guidelines were BRD, beyond reasonable doubt. And when you tried a case, you waited a week before you made a decision, and it worked. I tried many a case.
Now, I'd like to move you forward to where your career led you up to Washington, D.C.
Yes, it did. Yeah, they kept me on board because of these experiences I had as a governor and a judge and this and that and whatever not.
And you ended up, as I recall, working for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs,
of
and
Staff.
reporting to the President of the United
correct.
States. So let's
And
have a hand for Mr. Lorenz. Good job. Now, if we have any questions from the audience for either of these gentlemen or for anybody up here that would like to answer it, do we have any questions? I know that you Boy Scouts, look at all the badges on those chests. Their future World War something. Hopefully not a World War, but you know. Anyway, would you gentlemen like to ask a question now? Okay. We have an open mic right here if you want to walk around. And that way the cameras can look at you as well. We don't want to leave our future leaders out. Yeah. Okay, so.
I had a question for Mr. Ripley. What persuaded you to join the military?
What did he say?
He wants to know what persuaded you to enter the military.
Drafted, right?
Well, I was 17 years old, and I would have been 18 in January the 12th, and I didn't want to go in the Army, so I joined the Navy.
There's an honest man.
And I stayed in there like 11 days of being 3 years, and took boot camp in Jacksonville, and I stayed at Daytona Beach for night flying for the whole time.
Another question?
I have a question for Miss Diggs. Where did you serve? Like, how many countries?
As a nurse, you never know for sure where you're going to go. Not necessarily combat area. You may go to other places to help out people. That's how I got to Yugoslavia, to help those people during the earthquake.
Do we have any more questions?
And we have, for your information, we have men who are nurses down in the military. And even very high ranking. And that is a career for them, and they enjoy it and like it.
Good. We have a hand being raised.
Gloria told me about when she got to the Philippines. Here she is. You see how tall she is and how little she is. She had to go over the side of a hospital ship, which is a very high freeboard, going down the ropes, or I forget how she described it, with a full pack on her back. And I'll never forget, hearing that and trying to picture it in my mind.
Now you have to tell me what she said.
She said that she remembers you telling a story of when you had to crawl over off of a ship down the rope ladder with a full pack on your back. And she thought that was phenomenal because of your size. You're so little.
Well, when we got to the Philippines, we were on the USS Comfort. That's right, we traveled to the Philippines because we were on our way to the invasion of Japan. And the Comfort was diverted to the Philippines. And we got there, the war was over. We had to go from the Comfort down to LST by a rope ladder with a full pack on our back to the LST, and then we got on the Philippines in land. But it was an ordeal for a bunch of...
How many of you had to do that? How many nurses had to do that particular stint?
We had 200 aboard.
Oh, my.
And then we went to live at San Tomas in the Philippines, where the Americans had been interned during the Japanese occupation.
Thank you.
Very interesting, a short tour there, but very interesting. The people, the Filipino people that were welcomed us with open arms.
Good, as they should have.
Yeah.
And now we have another question from the floor.
I'm Charlotte Christ, and I retired Navy, and I'm very grateful to that lady for opening doors for us and cracking that ceiling. I have a question for you, Colonel. You told me about coming back to the U.S. on troop ship, and what was your reception? I know Roney had a great reception. What was your reception?
When we arrived in the U.S.?
Yes.
At New York?
Yes.
Well, my friend and I were in combat dress, and we went to New York to the Hilton Hotel. We've been in the Philippines, and we wanted a luxury evening. We went to the hotel, and the guy at the desk took one look at us and said, "I'm sorry, we don't have any room." Well, my friend, who was Mrs. Owens, who lived here, she was the wife of Albert Owens, who lives here in Mathews, and she was with me, and she said, "Well, young man, I have been in the Philippines exaggerated, for 3 years, fighting a war so you can live in the lap of luxury at this hotel. And if you don't find me a room to sleep tonight, you see that sofa over there? We're going to spend the night on the sofa. And he said, wait a minute, lady, wait a minute. They found us a room.
As they should have found you a room, although a sofa might not have been so bad in a pinch, huh? Do we have any more questions? We have a question. Would you like to come up to the podium, or can you?
I think you can hear me good. For Mr. P.B. Watt, he spent a lot of time cruising around the Pacific and looking for something. But we never said you found it.
We had one contact.
There's a couple things I'd like to add.
We actually, while we were there at Anahuac, that was kind of a collection point for ships coming out from the States, and they would get there and form into, a group of ships to head on out into the forward areas. And we would go out, kind of fly anti-sub, and we had one contact. And what you did and of course this was on radar, when you got a contact, you told the captain, and he'd get on the radio and he'd call back to see if there were any of our subs in the vicinity, because, we didn't want to be shooting or dropping depth charges on our own planes. So this took a little bit of time, and, we got the word that it wasn't one of our subs. So we kept flying, and just about the time we came up, to drop it, our contact disappeared. So we never did drop a depth charge on them. That's it. Like I say, my time out in the Pacific was, kind of uneventful. And looking back on that now, hey, it was a pretty good time. I spent a lot of my time going around the beach and the atoll looking for shells and different things, seashells, and I don't have any complaints about my time spent in the Navy and in the squadron. It was a good time.
And now Mr. Baxter Sheelaw has just informed me that he has a few comments that he would like to add. So if you'll get up to your mic a little bit.
I left out a couple items. I wasn't prepared to come up here. But when I was in the service, I was in Italy. I served in Anzio. If y'all know where Anzio's at, you know what we went through. And I also served in the Battle of the Bulge. We all know about that.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got 5 battle stars where I went through. That's it.
That's good news, yeah.
Well, if we have no other questions from the floor, I think would it be a good idea if you folks would like to come up here, enter there, and stay on this side of the railing, and then shake these people's hands and have a private conversation with them. You're more than welcome to do that.